as much as we want.
Yes.
Life goes on. Yeah, we gave them 3. Manu are given 3. How?
Can you get into the newspapers?
Yeah. On the front page of the Daily Nation, I saw that coming. On the front page of the Daily Nation. Thank you, Vivian and Mike. Okay. Talk to them later on, and they'll give you some kind of insightful debate there later on. But okay, so let me take you through the front page of the local daily, starting with the Daily Nation. Of course, on the front page, the men who control multi-billion state system. The men who control multi-billion shillings state systems. That is also the front page of the Daily Nation here. But still, on a good note, Perez Chipchirchir, the world champ, she actually outpaced Ethiopia's Tigst Assefa to win gold in the Tokyo World Championships and Athletic Championship in Japan. And of course, that is one of the key highlights of the weekend. The ladies doing some great work there in Japan. And of course, the main story here on the front page of the local dailies, this Daily Nation, is the men who control multi-billion shillings. Let me just give you a quick shot on that. The men who control multi-billion shillings state. The question is about ownership of critical public systems such as e-citizen and electronic platforms for health and procurement, alleged by auditors and MPs to be controlled by private entities despite government denial, and is now increasingly becoming under scrutiny, informed by data, security concerns, and the vast sums of money involved. That is what is here on the front page of the Daily Nation. Banks face huge losses over fake titles. Banks face huge losses over fake titles. A very concerning, great matter there of concern. And of course, still on the front page of the Daily Nation, TSC sets new rules for transfer of teachers. Again, something that we'll be talking about probably later in the week on how this is going to affect the transfer of teachers. The president met the teachers across the country 2-3 days ago at State House in Nairobi, and now there is that new rule set for the transfer of teachers. New DCI team takes over lawyers' murder probe. Some of the suspects who were apprehended last week were released on Friday night when DCI said that they were not able to link them with the gruesome murder of the city lawyer. And so, who are these 3 people on what the Daily Nation would call lucrative deals? One of them is Abdullahi Sheikh, Convergence Network Solutions shareholder. And there is another gentleman here there with a silhouette. I don't know whether the photo has not been found yet, but that is what I have, the silhouette. It's called Tahun bin Zaid Al Nanhan, one of the owners of Apero Limited. And finally, James Ayugi, founder of Webmasters Limited. The 3 gentlemen who have been featured on the front page of the Daily Nation. Very quickly on the inner pages here we have got scholar, schema victim, the many faces of Matthew Mbobu. You can take a look at that story, and according to Daily Nation, well, the Daily Nation has outlined and given some figures there, probably one of the issues in contention, but yes, we'll talk about that later on. Mbobu murder, new team takes over probe as 3 suspects freed who were apprehended over last week. And now, again, the issue of Kwanza, where it says that tracing new holy wilderness of death. Remember Shakahola, and now Kwanza is also making headlines. The men controlling public systems with billions of shillings. This is the story fleshed on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation. Auditor General and several governance experts have sounded an alarm over the control of digital systems by private companies. That is what I have here. The Ruto administration has contracted automated systems to improve service delivery across different sectors of the economy, but has yet to gain full control despite spending billions of taxpayers' money. That is what I have here on the Daily Nation. But even as we continue that one, allow me to bring in Engineer Crispus Wathimba, who is a governance expert, a gentleman who is not new to Jerusalem. Crispus, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Happy to be here.
Good to see you once again. How is Kenya doing?
Not bad. I think 3 years
Yes.
into Ruto's administration, we have a lot to interrogate.
Yes.
See? Mixed bags of fortunes, hits and misses. But I think so far so good.
So far so good.
Yeah.
Out of 10?
Out of 10, I think we are still approaching expectation, probably 4 out of 10.
Okay, I thought you were going to play safe. Approaching expectation. Okay, so we are almost half the mark. Okay,
Yeah.
And of course, Hesbon Omolo, who is a council member of ISPAC, FCPA Hesbon Omolo. Good morning, Hesbon.
Good morning, Victor.
Good morning, Bon.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Again, 3 years down the line into the fourth one. What a journey.
Yeah, it's been a tough journey.
Yes.
A journey full of many pitfalls, challenges here and there.
Yes.
But in the totality of it, I would give a very favorable score. It's akin to a child living in a harsh environment.
Yes.
And managing to score 40%, as it says. I would give a 60% given the environment.
Wow. 60. That is above average, by far. So in the next 2 years, we'll hit 100 or 80.
I think subject to one or two things, and I think two critical issues have been a challenge to this
Great.
government. One is that the country was just getting out of the COVID season when this government came into being. But two, we've had a very polarized political space.
Yes.
With a lot of demonstrations, and that has hindered a lot of this government's ability to deliver on its promises. Remember, every single year since 2023, we've been having massive protests.
Yeah.
First over cost of living, then we had taxation pushback, and until just recently, we now have a semblance of stability.
Yes.
But also, it's coming at a point in time when the new election is the election of 2027 is coming full circle.
Fast approaching.
So the environment has not been very, very conducive.
I don't know what Professor is thinking about. Professor Emmanuel Mutisia, educationist, economist, and development expert. Prof, good morning.
Good morning, Victor.
In the other side of the world, we say Wamukata.
That's a view.
Very nice.
Yes.
Out of his 40%, 60%, what about you?
Well, thank you very much, Victor, for giving us this opportunity.
Karibu.
And I think this is a platform where we tell Kenyans as it is. And, at the end of the day, we'll be looking at numbers, because numbers never lie. I will give the government a very favorable score, given, and I'm basing this on two things. One, of course, the commitments that the government made in 2022 for this period of 5 years. And number two is the global economic dynamics which are affecting every other country across.
Okay.
And with that, I give the government 70%.
70. 40, 60, 70.
Based on all these factors. But of course, looking at the challenges that we're facing, if you go outside the country, you will hear that people talking about Kenya, rising, Kenya moving forward, Kenya growing.
Yes.
If you compare ourselves with those other countries, you realize that we are in a very nice country.
40.
Therefore, of course, we look at those dynamics and make sure that at least we align our thought process to ensure that we give the government the right score. And I'm saying this.
Let's take a break.
Give it back. I'm a professor, and when you take students through a process, you don't give a first-year student a fourth-year exam. Thank you.
That's deep. We'll be right back with more.
If it's I like that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay. Welcome back. Okay, so it's now 5 past 7 a.m. It's a good Monday, so let's get to work. Okay, so on the front page of the Standard newspaper, I gave you the front page of the Daily Nation. On the front page of the Standard, the housing bribe, that is also on the front page of the Standard, had the housing bribe. Launched with fanfare as the silver bullet to Kenya's housing crisis despite protest over salary reductions with no direct benefits, the affordable housing program is fast turning into President William Ruto's political carrot. His latest pledge to hand teachers 20% of the units has raised fresh questions on whether there are any rules on how these houses are allocated. That is what's on the front page of the Standard newspaper. And then still on the front page, Shah staring at slow death as the Director of Criminal Investigations launches a probe into 31 hospitals of fraudulent medical claims. Government insiders fear poor implementation is crippling programs, I beg your pardon, once hailed as a lifeline for ordinary Kenyans. That is on the front page of the Standard. Of course, a couple of issues we'll be taking a look shortly. And finally, on the front page of the Star, 3 years later, Ruto's key projects face hurdles. Basically, that's our subject of discussion today. President promised reforms, but challenges abound. And now, but I have to give it, gentlemen, the ladies did well in Japan. We still have golds. We can smell about that. I think we can give them a clap, gentlemen. I mean, we have our own issues, but the ladies are presenting very well. You get it?
Yes.
So, coming back to it.
Not just ladies, all the sports personalities.
I stand corrected.
Across the various.
Thank you. I stand corrected. Very good. So, Crispus, you said 40%.
Yes.
Substance shit.
For example, if we take, for example, the housing program. The housing program was an initiative, number one, geared to deliver 250,000 houses per year. So far, the houses that are complete are around 300,000.
Okay, let me help you with the Star. There you have it on the front page.
Yes.
Okay.
The houses that are complete are around 3,000. We have ongoing projects not completed, over 160,000 houses ongoing across the country. And in this first administration, this term, they were supposed to deliver close to 1 million houses.
Yes.
So definitely the government was not to deliver all of them. So the others were to be developed by the private sector. So how do we achieve that? One of the areas that this program was supposed to impact is try to make even construction of houses by the private sector is affordable. So it was supposed to spur an industry in the construction sector. For example, the cost of construction materials would go down. Since this administration took over, yes, we've had affordable housing kick off, but the bag of cement has gone up. The cost of steel has gone up. Fuel has gone up. Those are very key inputs that go into the construction sector, which has made it even very hard for the private sector to participate. For example, also the access to credit. We are not able to see this uptick by mortgage borrowers who are going to banks to borrow money to construct or build their own homes. So that is a challenge I feel the government has failed to achieve, because it is not the business. The government today is the biggest developer, and that was not the intention. The government is supposed to provide an environment where we are going to build a couple of big developers competing favorably in an environment where cost of production is low, the business environment is favorable, there is transparency in how procurement and processes are being done, so that everybody can be able to participate. So yes, the program has started, but has it achieved what it is required? Let's go to health sector. Yes, we were promised a reformed health system, but were we told it's going to cost 104 billion? Were we told that by the first year of it being rolled out, we'll be having leakages in the tunes of 10 billion shillings, 24 billion shillings? Were we told that we will still be dealing with the issues of hospitals not being paid?
Yeah.
If the health system was to be reformed, in my own opinion, we required some boldness and innovativeness. We are not in the business of supplying patients to hospitals and healthcare workers. As a government, you are in the business of preventing your people from getting sick, providing the right nutrition, providing the proper quality of life, making sure that even those service providers are doing it at affordable cost, that there is available services both in private and in public, so that we are not, there's no form of monopoly, there's no exploitation. That is what a government is supposed to do when it comes to health sector. But right now, government is the biggest health provider. There are huge leakages that we are seeing in this system. There is a system that has been brought. It's not very innovative as we thought. There is no policy that we can say that is quite innovative in that sector. So we are still going to deal with the same issues that we complained NHIF about, of high cost, of leakages, and we are not seeing an end to these things. Let's go to food security. God has blessed us with good rains. We have maize production that is doing very well. We have the fertilizer subsidy. But have we increased a variety of food production in the country? Are we only reliant on maize as a staple food? We have seen cases where rice is still being imported when our farmers are have enough. We have seen cases where wheat is being imported when our farmers have enough. We are still having sugar being imported when our farmers are still struggling with being paid. So we need to address this issue in a way that we have a complete departure from where we have been for the last 20 years.
I want to give Hesbon his time also to give foundation to his 60% rating. Hesbon, substantiate yours as well.
I think just like my brother said, he has reasons why he doubts a few things.
Yes.
But I would start by economic stabilization. How far has this government done in terms of stabilizing the economy? We've had the Kenya shilling hovering at 160. That is now stable at about 130 to the dollar. Our forex reserve is at an all-time high. That means there's something being done correct by our national treasury. Then we have quite a number of parameters. Our GDP has continued to grow at a rate way above what is in the global space, 3.3%. We are way above even the African average. So we are doing very well on that front. Almost every other sector, if you look at how it has performed economically, you will see that there is a bit of progress. Now that is one. Now the other issue was we had promises around affordable housing, like he says. Has Consult just a few days ago gave a report on the performance of housing market globally. Kenya is ranked highest in the African continent here, and globally, our return on investment in that space is very, very high. People are flocking here to invest in housing sector. What may not apply appropriately when you look at the housing in totality is that the affordable bit, which is at the common man's level, there is no strong uptake of private sector, which is understandable. Remember, housing is one of the basic needs of a human being, decent housing. And therefore, the government cannot afford, in a country that is developing like Kenya, to leave that to be private sector driven. If you do that, you will have a nation that is very expensive. And therefore, the government must step in and ensure that we have ability to drive our key sectors of our economy by affording it cheap labor. And you can only have cheap labor if housing is cheap, because the people who are to work for you must reside somewhere. So I think the government has done well, bringing down the slums in this city of Nairobi. You can see what has happened in some of those slums. Very happy faces. I saw some articles on TV, some news showing people moving into units they did not imagine they would move to. And even though they're slightly expensive, they would say they would pay more in the informal settlement without it being clear. You know, there are certain hidden cost of living that people don't understand. Somebody living in Karen would pay very little for a 20-liter of jerrycan. If you were to open your tap, fill that 20-liter jerrycan and see how much the city council will charge you. An equivalent amount of water in the slum would cost close to 50, 60 shillings, which is not realistic. That is poverty tax. So when you build this affordable housing, you are giving access to pipe water into these houses, you are giving access to electricity, you are avoiding a lot of other things that these people go through on a daily basis. So I think in terms of housing, the government has done well. But remember, the journey towards actualizing that affordable housing, we had a lot of tiff and tough around the law, the courts had invalidated. So there was a lot of delay that you cannot blame the government for, because there has to be the legality aspect of it, there has to be the law that has to enable it. So I think in the full construct of that, then you say the government has done well, and therefore I give it a good score in that space. Now let's go to healthcare. We have...
Can I get the Prof's insight as well? Then we'll clamp them back together. All right. If you don't mind. Okay, Prof. Substantiate your 70% rating.
No, thank you very much, Victor. Well, I'm aligned with some of the thought processes from my fellow panelists. But as I said in the beginning, as a teacher, when you set exams, you don't give a first-year exam. A first-year exam, a first-year fourth-year exam. Or when, because of dynamics that were not expected, when examinations get too hard, we have what we call normalization of scores to get, to bring about fairness, because of these different, difficult levels. In 2002, the government committed to do a lot. And in economics, you talk about ceteris paribus, and all factors held constant. And looking at what has happened in this country over those 3 years, the government has done the best. And comparing that with what is happening in many other countries, we are far much ahead of most of the things that we committed. As Esmond did say, economic-wise, we have sort of stabilize our inflation. I think, over the last 3 years, we've cut inflation by 50%, from around 9% to 4%. And this is what we see with the dollar, with the cost of living and so on and so forth, which, of course, the president talks about very much by saying that instead of subsidizing consumption, we should focus on subsidizing production. This is what happens in advanced economies. And, we've done that with the agricultural sector, where we see, of course, fertilizer going down by more than 50%. Yeah. And, of course, making sure that this is accessible to most of the farmers. I saw the CS of agriculture saying that now we expect a bumper harvest of around 7 million bags of maize moving forward. We need to contextualize all this to say the following. One, we came, this government took over during a very hard time. Of course, you go back to COVID, but then you come to where we are in 2022 and see the steps that we made over those 3 years, and we appreciate that we are in the right direction. And as I said, numbers don't lie. Engineer just said that, of course, we have built houses, affordable. When I did my PhD back in 2012, my focus was Kibera slums. We are seeing Kibera slums being transformed into a city of the future, where before people will come here and profile Kibera as a failed, a failed space in this country. A failed space because, we were building a city of slums, where, many of these slums were mushrooming across. And NGOs will come here to use our case to go and fundraise and, get money to come and to say that they are trying to assist us, support those those families who do not have toilets because they only access flying toilets around. And so we're looking at that and looking at what other advanced countries are doing or have done before. If you go to China, you go to Korea, you go to Singapore, you go to Malaysia, the housing sector is a basic need. Okay. And they have put all these to make sure that, of course, other sectors, like health sector, are taken care of. Because then, if you live in a safe environment, a clean environment, the issues of health that have been raised will not be a common challenge that we've seen over the last several years. Number two is around now the universal health care, which has been mentioned. And certainly, of course, there are issues. Why? Because we have a new system. When you test a new system, you are bound to get challenges, you are bound to get gaps. But until you get it to the level where now you stabilize everything, we must walk through and support one another to ensure that these gaps are sealed. And, go back to the history of when Obama was the president. We had the Obamacare. It had all these issues. At the end of the day, the system was stabilized. And today, even when successful presidents come in and want to bring down that system because of politics, you realize, no, it is working for the people, and the people don't want to have that changed. When you look at the numbers of this, shift, you realize that we are almost at around 26 million, people who have already enrolled into the system. Number two, the government has already, employed more than 100,000, community health workers. Yes. Why is the government doing this? Because we know for an economy to grow to a first world, health becomes a fundamental, sector that, the government must invest in to ensure that we have a healthier, population. Yes. So I look at these numbers and I say that, if we have moved from where we are to 26 million, subscribers to the SHIF, or 100,000 community health workers, bringing health, services closer to Mwananchi, then that is a plus And in that, I look at William Ruto and I say that your government has exceeded expectations.
Okay. Hesbon, what about inflation? I mean, when you look at the central bank, it has got some mixed record of inflation. Is there any chance of it stabilizing and perhaps being better for Wanjiku at the end of the day?
I think inflation has continued to shift based on several emerging challenges from every corner. But by and large, if it's moved from 9.6, at some point it went to 3.3. And then there are also global shocks that have an effect when the entire supply chain globally is interrupted, like when we had the war between Iraq and Iran and Israel. You realize that then even the fear of moving commodities along the Strait of Hormuz affects the entire movement of commodities. So that, in one way or the other, will affect the cost of some of our products, including oil. So definitely, that has an effect. But again, our cyclic season of rains, sometimes the rain patterns are good, and therefore you're able to have most of our basic commodities, our food items that feed the basket of that we look at when we look at inflation, is positively impacted. But then over time, certain things also change. So it is possible to stabilize, but according to this government, the prayer was to have it below 5%.
Yeah.
That is being achieved, and I don't see any likelihood of it going beyond that. Of course, the government must still keep tabs on quite a number of things, especially as we move towards 2026, as the campaign season comes full circle. There's likelihood that money can come into this country from unknown quarters that may drive certain things in a wrong direction. Remember, we are also surrounded by countries at war. So in terms of even keeping our borders safe and secure around some of these things, it's very difficult, because you can imagine the entire stretch we have with Somali. You can imagine the challenges in South Sudan. And we are a heaven where those who have problems with their countries get into. So there are several parameters that may affect how we look at our inflation. But by and large, there are strong signs around the agricultural sector, which is a backbone. It contributes the highest part of our GDP. If that sector is managed well, you manage the first bit of it. If you manage the issue of cost of oil, which is a key driver and a key contributor to inflation, we are in a stable space. If you manage the energy cost generally, then we are in a space where we can manage some of these things. And then go to the disposable income that the common man has. I think that has been challenged largely because of the deductions we've had under Social Health Authority, under affordable housing, and also the enhanced saving that the common man takes to NSSF on a monthly basis. I think those are the hidden aspects that reduce the disposable income, so that at the end of the month, your take-home is reduced, and therefore you feel you cannot afford the commodities, even if the prices remained the same. And therefore, we must be deliberate in trying to grow the economy in a manner that allows enterprises, both in private sector, to be able to increase what they can give employees as take-home, but even government to be able to adjust the wages for the employees. For that to happen, Kenya must also collect taxes that are commensurate with the wealth that is being created in our economy. We are only collecting about 15% of our GDP as taxes. We have exhausted the legroom of additional taxes. You do that, the citizens rebel. So the only way is to have tax collection efficiency and also control our cost of doing business. And therefore, this is where I would also want to plead, even with our three arms of government. There are certain things that are good for the country. Government, EGP, for example, would help us save a lot of money, which can then be moved or pushed to targeted areas that would help the country. If you can save close to 40% of what you are spending on government services, you're able to redirect those resources towards the critical areas that need support, the areas you need to boost. If it is the SME, if you can save 300 billion, it means you are not going to the market to borrow that money. You are redirecting the financial services sector to address what my friend here was mentioning, that access to credit to the private sector is constrained because government is over-borrowing to address the challenge of the public debt. So I think that if we're able to look at that space well, and I think generally the government has done well, I don't foresee our inflation going beyond 5%. If anything, it should oscillate between where it is now and probably even 3%. 3% would be a deal.
When you talk about 40%, coming back to you, Crispus, and based on the figures he's given on inflation, does that really reflect on what's on Wanjiku's pocket?
You see, one of the challenges many Kenyans are facing is a disconnect between the numbers that are being shared around in terms of inflation, stabilization of the economy, cost of living. In terms of translating that to our day-to-day life, there's a mismatch. For example, if you had 1,000 shillings 2022 and you have the same 1,000 shillings today, what can it be able to buy you that time and today? Let's take for example, by the time you reach this hour this morning, there are certain things you've consumed. For example, you've done you've used soap, toothpaste, you've taken some form of breakfast, you've driven your car here, you've looked at your phone, you've consumed data. Those are things that we are consuming today. But in terms of the inflationary statistics that they are basing on, probably it's in maize, tomato, viazi, things that you'll use at the end of the day. So therefore, we need to appreciate that the way we measure inflation in terms of government assessing inflation and the way we measure as a common man are totally two different things. You take a matatu coming to work, you'll probably find maybe the journey you spent 20 shillings, now it is 30 shillings. Yeah. But government says inflation is still okay. But where you are paying 20 shillings and now you are paying 30, that's a rise of 50%. It cannot compare to the 5% or 3% they are discussing. When fuel was about to go down, they increased our fuel levy of 7 shillings. It was sliding. There was a VAT that was increased from 8 to 16%. So all these are contributing to the ability of the common man enjoying these numbers that we are being told about. So the numbers look very good because they are measured on variables that are not relating to the common man. Yet the reality on the ground is that, number one, you've taken a lot of my money in terms of taxes. So my ability to consume has been constrained. My ability to support many other Kenyans that I support. A paycheck in an urban environment like Nairobi, Nakuru, Kisumu supports so many people up country. You find that 1,000 you send somebody, that's a very impactful thing back in the village. But now if I'm not able to send that 1,000, what happens? That tip I give an askari, that tip I gave a waiter, that small contribution I make helps to spur the economy. When I don't have that contribution, what effect does it have to the economy? What effect does it have to the general health of the economy of the country? There are many Kenyans who are not even in that tax bracket, but they rely on people who are in the tax bracket.
Yes.
So when those people are being constrained, they are not able to support them, then it has a impact in terms of those people's livelihood. So we need to be able to connect ourselves, to align ourselves between these numbers you're mentioning here and the reality on the ground.
Okay, so how is the government tackling the big challenges? That is a big question when it comes to economy and, you know, the Kenya Kwanza administration manifesto in general. How is the government tackling the big challenges? I want us to handle that when we circle back after this break. Time flies so fast. It's already 7:30. To me, we've not even started yet. But anyway, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Even if it's not the white man, it's for the Chinese.
Do you know the Ugandans here are already saying they're not exporting their raw materials. They're doing value addition. They are doing value addition, so that they get 3 times the price of this basic commodities we're saying we export. That's where we need to work.
That is part of our discussion. We are back.
That's where I want us.
Let's continue. The discussion is on. The discussion is on. So welcome back. So how is the government tackling the big challenges, gentlemen? Because now it seems that from what Crispus was saying, engineer, is that there are certain hurdles that the government must face, including what the president said when he met members of the public at State House. He assured members of the public that yes, we are having a lot of problems, but just be patient a bit. We are going to stabilize the economy. So what are some of these hard challenges that President William Ruto and this administration must face for us to make it? Coming back to you, Hezbollah.
I think one of the hardest challenges the president needed to deal with, which has bedeviled his government over the last 3 years,
Yes.
has been political instability. And I think to a large extent he's done well. He needs to maintain that. The nation needs a stable environment for us to progress. But number two, our public debt remains a big challenge.
Yes.
I know we've moved to around 66% of GDP in terms of the exposure, but our daily cost of servicing that debt, if you look at the collective sum total of it, is still very high. And unless we find some miracle somewhere, we are continuing to spend more of our taxes towards debt service. And I think one of the things this government must do going forward, be very intentional to drive development programs away from either additional loans, work more towards PPP projects.
Yes.
So that then the key development projects that we need that will drive and bring us money are driven from a private sector perspective. Although the risk around those being abused through corrupt practices is also there. So we need to have an enabling legislation that is able to do that. But more importantly, tap into our national saving culture.
Yes.
To help drive our development into the future, because you realize Kenya is probably the least saving country in this region. Even our neighbors, Uganda and Tanzania, have saved more than us in their equivalent of NSSF. That speaks to a nation where we do not want to take care of our seniors when they retire. I've always said it here, Victor, the statistics are grim, that 40% of those who retire when they hit 60 die within 2 years in this country. That is how bad it is. So even as we complain about lacking money to spend now, when you get to 60, you shudder at the moment you walk to your retirement with a check of 700,000, and that symbolizes your work for 20 years, 30 years plus. I think that has to change. Our seniors must retire with something decent that allows them to live a life where they can extend their life in this world, because as you retire, diseases, all those other things mount. So cash is king. So I think those are areas the government needs to look at. But other than that, I also wanted to highlight something that my brother mentioned. I think one of the reasons why Kenyans are not feeling the good work this government has done around what we can pick out from our economic statistics is because we have an equal society where trickle down of these benefits are very difficult in certain quarters. So the government must be very deliberate to unlock the potential of the underprivileged lot. And majority of Kenyans are not employed. So the unemployment space is largely supported by the informal sector. So he must then, as a deliberate strategy, put more resources and strategies towards unlocking the informal sector. And how do you unlock the informal sector? It's additional support to the agricultural value chain. It's additional support to the SMEs and MSMEs. How we can strengthen that space. I know there is the program under Hustler Fund. We need to deepen support to these people and unlock the private sector. Then you will probably start having people feeling the benefit of that.
Okay. Prof, by March 2023, the GDP stood at 68%. Was that good or bad way back then?
GDP
stood at
the debt to GDP.
The debt to,
yes.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm just going to, before I even address that question, I'm just going to add to what
the debt to GDP, yes.
Hezbollah said. One, a number of challenges that we're facing, and I think that also aligns with what Engineer has said, that one of the biggest challenges that we find ourselves today in is that the government committed about ensuring that money gets to the pockets of the people, especially the common man. But why all these numbers are good, and people at the bottom are still grumbling, is because they are not seeing that money coming to their pockets. See, and we'll hear people saying that, we don't need roads, we don't need all these things. We need to see the money, and I think for government to get that level, a lot of dynamics have to take place, and that is what the development that we've seen over the last 3 years, is leading us to getting money to the pockets of the common mwananchi. And until that is done, then the noise that we hear and the complaints that we get from the common mwananchi will continue. And so the government must make deliberate efforts in ensuring that money gets to the pockets of people. Number two, it's about the public wastage. We have all these resources that we have, and a bigger part of it goes to wastage. I think if the government controls this wastage or seals the gaps, that money goes to development, then it will be very awful.
Would it be the reason why the government is calling for the e-procurement?
Well, that's one of the reasons. And that is why everybody is complaining, because there have been gaps in the procurement system of this country, that people make all these 10%, 5% across. But now, because they know once the e-procurement system is in place, then the best will be selected automatically by the system. And that is one way of ensuring that we seal the gap that we see with our wastage system. If that is done, certainly, of course, this money will be now moved to the 5 pillars of the Kenya Kwanza administration. And advancing that, including, of course, what we are seeing with the ASLA fund, the SMEs, the ESP markets, and so on and so forth. The other thing is about the taxation. Taxation has been a burden to the middle class. Those guys who are above the bottom. The ones who, of course, who are feeling that pinch. When you get a 2% plus, or when 40% of your salary goes to taxes, you feel that pain. And then your disposable income decreases, which means that the money that you send to those farm workers in the village also decreases, or you have to fire people out there. Again, that has affected the trickle-down process of resources coming from that group of people to the people at the bottom. But one thing that we need to understand, and I think I like what President Ruto says, we must finance our development. This is what happened in China way before, and one of my friends did tell me that in 1992, China complained about the same. But China is where it is today because they're financing that. The only challenge that we put to the government is to ensure that these taxes work for the people. They don't work for a few people at the top. They work for all, Kenyans across. Now, coming down to the 68%, it is not about the percentage part of it. In fact, if it doesn't get beyond 7%, you are quite okay. But if we are to talk about the debt, the GDP debt ratio, or the debt GDP ratio, and if you are to go around and look at the figures, of advanced countries, you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked by Japan. You'd be shocked by UK. You'd be even shocked by the US, whose debt is around 30 trillion USD, way above their 27 trillion economy, which means that it's more than 100%. The point here is that how do we grow our industrial base? Because they borrow from themselves. Japan borrows domestically. The US borrows domestically, and it's denominated in dollars. Until now we get to that level of our saving culture, so that we can start borrowing from within, then this debt GDP ratio is going to be a problem to us. But where it is at the moment is not a problem. We are okay with 68, 70%. The only thing that we need to do is to ensure that our industrial development comes first. And one of the questions that we ask ourselves, and this is a point that was raised by one of my good friends out there, said that we do not have a very strong industrial development policy, and that is what has guided most of the economies to get where they are. The government must make deliberate efforts in ensuring that we have that policy, implement it, grow our industries, so that we can create the jobs that we're talking about, the decent jobs. And it's not just people complaining, saying that, Ruto is, creating jobs in the construction sector. Well, so far, we have around 300,000 that have been created there.
Yes.
But even in the digital space, under the Ministry of IC and Digital Economy, we have around 300,000 other jobs that have been created because of the growth of the digital space in this country. The fiber optic, the last mile, fiber optic, and also the innovations that have been created by Kenyans around. So importantly, we need to grow our economy internally. So that we can fund our operations, both internally and, take care of these external fundamentals that are affecting
my
our
next
development.
question. What about our relationship with our big brothers out there? I mean, is it really affecting the stability of our economy. China, of course, we've been friends for years, since Kenyatta administration to date. Has it really affected our debt crisis?
The issue about the debt is because of the local needs as a country. It's not about our relationship out there. Our relationship with our other economies is very good. Okay. And people will make, people will play politics. Say that, oh, Kenya is this, or Kenya is not liked, or Kenya is blacklisted. But any major summit in any advanced country globally must have Kenya on the table. Okay. We were in Japan in August. The Tokyo International Conference on African Development. President Ruto was actually the key head of state and government in that summit. Last year we were in Korea, for the Korea-Africa Summit. Without this that took place there, would not have taken place. In China, the same thing. It's only that we are now deliberate in not just looking, to the West. We must look across and build, partners across, globally.
From ISPAC.
I think what I would say is debt to GDP, just like he says, those are just ratios. Yes, they could be pointers to how best you can run your economy. The big elephant in the room, you can have a debt to GDP ratio of 60 or 70%, but the cost of servicing that debt is cheaper than the cost of somebody who has a debt to GDP ratio of 50. So it's about what is the cost of that debt, because the problem is more than 50% of that debt is domestic. Yes. But at what cost are we servicing that debt? We are paying over 10% on average for that local debt. Now, if you pay another 3% on the external debt, you find yourself paying over 1 trillion shillings as debt service out of your 2.5 trillion revenue collection. So that is where, for me, the problem lies. So if we can be able to stabilize our economy, to stabilize the cost of borrowing, and the only way you stabilize that cost of borrowing, because market forces apply, is to ensure that as a country, you have a budget that indicates lower deficit. That is a disincentive for the private sector to know that government is not going to borrow much from us. Let's push our money to the private sector. That's one. Two, our legal reforms is priced in the risk of borrowing in this country. Yes. So that if I have a title deed in a bank, and that title deed 2 years later is declared fake, what happens to the bank? So if we don't have a system that banks can trust, that if you fail to pay a loan, they have a recourse in court and they can get justice within the shortest time possible, the justice system works. All these things are finding themselves in how we do business. Yes. So the cost of doing business in a country has many, many faces, including a functional judicial system, including a legal regime that is reliable and predictable. So I think those are the things I wanted to add. But I think more importantly, globally, and this is why we need to cast our nets wider, we need to appreciate that there is shift in global dynamics, and that is geopolitics. What happens in America, how it relates with China and India, all those things around BRICS are things we must not lose sight on, because one way or the other, they will affect our interests locally here. You've had our complaints around Ukraine war. It has affected us in many ways how we do certain business. Yes. Then now there is the IMF and how it comes with these conditions. And even the politics today around IMF, why it is charging more to poor countries to borrow and charging less to developed countries to borrow. That you, being a big player, you borrow at 2% or 1% with less conditions. A small player borrows more expensively, more like the poverty tax. Yet when you look at the dynamics of IMF today, the big nations of 30, 40, 50 years ago are no longer big anymore. The economies in Europe are now very small.
Correct.
For example, India's economy has surpassed many of European Union countries. China has, over the last 20, 30 years, more or less clawed back 10 times the economies in Europe. So the dynamics have shifted. So the way the president says, the world must have a sitting. If IMF has to work for everyone, it must not be a big man's stool where there are 5 people on the table because they were big nations 30, 40 years ago, but now they're presiding over dying economies whose population average is very old. They are not the nations of the future. So it is important that we pay attention to that space, because when you want to borrow externally, we are going to be rated. And those ratings apply in how we service our debt.
Right.
And that is why it's important to appreciate, even as a country, how did we get here? People talk about how Kibaki had this lead on the cost of borrowing, why banks would hawk loans at the doorsteps. But the reason is, during Kibaki era, we were a poor nation. This nation decided to rebase its GDP in 2014, and many people don't understand what it means. It meant that we said there were certain aspects of our GDP or value of economy that was not factored in. Once we factored it in, we are now ranked on average as a middle-income country. Middle-income countries cannot access certain debts in the global market. The loans that Tanzania and Uganda can access at cheaper or no interest,
so
or even
ours,
we can't get. That's why we went to Eurobond. That's why you will not hear Eurobond in Uganda or Tanzania, because they are not in that space. We are in that space. So it's important that
it looks good.
Yes, so as long as we are able to manage then our economy in a manner that appreciates that, we need to put a lid on the cost of borrowing. For me, that is where we need to look at. I'm happy the financial services sector through the central bank and the commercial banks in Kenya are looking at how they price credit and to have a much fairer and predictable way of
So in the next 10 minutes, 3 years down into the fourth now. So let's have some sharp focus onto the next 1 year. All right? Crispus, all these things put together, the economic recovery, stability, infrastructure, talk about electricity connection, talk about health and all that. We've had, more or less what you've done is a postmortem for the last 3 years. So now look ahead. What do you think is now, if you're to sit on that round table with the president, what do you think could be your priorities to steer the country forward?
I think the challenge we have right now for the president is the issue of time. We are 2 years effectively, or around 20 months to the next general election. There is already one budget cycle that has been set that he must work with. So there is very little room in terms of how we can be able to maneuver around in terms of changing the economic blueprint for the next 1 year. Then the following year it will be a campaign period, so there will be a lot of promises, there will be a lot of reflection, there will be a lot of checking how far we've come. So in terms of what I would advise the president is you stabilize the economy, we must agree. But there are certain things that have not created the necessary, the impact that we were looking forward to. I think when we talk about Singapore, we talk about China, we talk about Korea, we talk about all these countries have a unique proposition that they relied upon to make certain deliberate actions so that they are where they are today. For example, China has a very huge population, which India also has. But China looked at that population and took advantage of it in terms of making itself a factory of the world and positioning itself in a way that there was a lot of investment that were made in that country. People were able to come and do their production in that country, and through that process China was able to learn and acquire a lot of skills and knowledge transfer, which now has helped them to position where they are today. Singapore, in the maritime world, where it was positioned, despite being kicked out of by Malaysia, it was in a very unique position where it was able to attract the trade traffic around the world. And it was said, they told themselves, if we are able to make ourselves a manufacturing hub, people can come and set up factories. We can be able to do the following and the following. Then what do we need? We need proper housing, we need a good healthcare system, we need a good financial system, and all this will be able to make people attracted to our location. Then what as a country do we need to say is our unique proposition as a region, so that we invest more in that, so that it can be able to attract the other areas of growth that we require as a country. But as long as we are doing all these experiments here and there, we will never get it right. We need to say, as a country, Kenya, where we are today, we are a stable economy, stable politically, although that has been challenged so far. We have a good human capital. How can we take advantage of that to prepare ourselves for the next 10, 20 years? Let us not work with a 5-year plan or 10-year plan. Let us work with a very long plan that can be able to be inherited by successive governments and be able to be built upon. But all these short-term things will not be able to help. This today I change the system, another one will come and remove the same system, then another one will come bring another system. We will never go anywhere. It will be all experimenting and will not go any far. So we need to be able to come up with a proper blueprint going forward that will set this country for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
That nobody...
We have Vision 2030.
Yeah.
It has only 5 years to go. Why did we lose track of it over 10 years ago? Do we go back to it? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. Is the Vision 2030 the same thing we have today in affordable housing, food security and health system? The political situation we have today is the same one in Vision 2030. That's what we need to ask ourselves. Where did we lose track? So that every successful government, including the counties, can follow the same blueprint. All these countries have been successful because there is a predictability. Uganda is stable, is doing where it is because Museveni is there. People know Museveni will always be there. In Tanzania, there is CCM. It will never change. But today we have UDA. Next year we have another party. We cannot tell where country will be.
Yeah.
So, you know, even South Africa, now that is becoming ANC, DA, people are now wondering, are we going to have a DA government in the next 10 years? Singapore was there because the government was always there. The PM would change, but the party will be there. We need to be able to create a predictable environment for people to bring capital, for people to plan.
Moving forward, Prof, when you talk about the role of leadership and collaboration, of course, moving forward, we've seen how the president has brought together different political players from different political parties, call them experts. Okay, that's their political name, whatever they use. But then, when we talk of the role of leadership and collaboration in stabilizing the economy in the country, how do you think the president should enhance and actually put more pin on that moving forward?
One of the most important things, and that the government must do,
yes,
is of course stabilizing our local politics. You know, when you talk about the broad-based government, I think a government, once a campaign cycle, an electoral cycle is complete, we need to go back as a country and start working for the country, not to start another cycle of political processes. And while we are talking about these other countries, you know, the dynamics in the Asian tigers or even the BRICS, is because of the stability of their local politics. People know that China's governance structures and systems will remain as they are. And that is why their vision is not 5 years, 20 years or 30 years, it's 100 years. You know, that is important because when you have a long-term vision and every political process is aligned to that, then you always must deliver. Now, when we look at their plans, now between now, by 2027, they must overtake the US. By 2029, they must be the leaders of the world. 2049, 100 years after, since they became who they are, you know. Now, if we had that, instead of just bringing politicians who come in and say that, engineer started this, I don't want to touch this, let me start mine so that I build my own personal legacy. Now, that is a lost, country. So, number one, we need to straighten our governance systems. And that, President William Ruto has an opportunity of bringing all these people together. Number two, as Kenyans, we must be committed to delivering this country from where it is to a better country. When you look at all these other countries that have done what they have done to be where they are, it is because of the people who have been committed to the cause of making sure that they stand out as the best. And in Kenya, we have the best human capital. You know, if you go across the world, you hear that, if you give it to a Kenyan, it will be done. If we can just take advantage of that human resource, then Kenya is going to get to a level never seen before. Our Vision 2030, I know the government is now doing Vision 2063, so that will align with the African Union Agenda 2063. Now, those visions are important. Only if whoever comes into power every 5 years or every 10 years aligns with the delivery of that particular vision. And I think for Kenyans, because in Kenya today, the Kenyans are now the guys who put checks and balances at what the government does. Kenyans must ensure that whoever becomes the president of Kenya aligns their development processes with the vision, the agenda, that long-term agenda that we as Kenyans have agreed to. Because a vision is not a government agenda. It is a Kenyan or a citizen sort of process. And finally, moving forward, what do we want to see? We have the 5 pillars that are yet to be fully achieved. We would like to see the president focusing on those 5 pillars. Because the 5 pillars, if properly implemented, will now take Kenya to that level that we're looking forward to. If it's agriculture, we go beyond the 7 million bags, beyond the maize and beans to other crops that can be consumed locally, but also exported. We need to get into the value chain development process. That instead of exporting coffee beans, we now add value here so that we build, we of course build those industries locally, but also create opportunities for our people. If you go to the SMEs, instead of just giving USLA fund, we need now to go beyond that. We started with what we committed, but now we need to give more to sort of, instead of giving a boda rider or owner 500 to fuel their motorcycle, we need now to move them to telling them that no, you can put your groups together and move to an SME production process, so that you create opportunities for others. If you go to the digital superhighway, of course we have created jobs, but we need to cement Kenya's leadership in the area of the digital space, not just in Africa, but across. The way we did with M-Pesa, we need now to be the Silicon Valley of not just Kenya or Africa, but for the rest of the world. Because the world believes in Kenyans, in our capacity in sort of innovating and taking the world to a better level. And finally, of course, the housing part of it. I believe that if we transform our cities from slums, the way the president is doing, the Kibiram, the Mukuru, Kwanza, and so on and so forth, we are going to attract the right investments, especially foreign direct investments. And this now revolves around doing business in Kenya better than the rest of the continent.
I have a message here from a gentleman called Edward Aseli. He says that he's in economics class. So he's late, literally, for class because he's attending class on KBC. And the director is also good enough. He says that we'll delay Kidogo for the next 10 minutes. Okay. So I think that is okay. And when you come back, I'll give you, of course, 10 more minutes so that we do our final remarks. All right? Stay with us. Welcome back. Today, I've just seen that today is International Day for Democracy. Interesting. Okay. Today we are not talking about politics, if you've noticed. Today is about economics 101. Hakuna siasa leo. Okay, Edward Aseli, we are almost done with the classes. So sawa. So fees inalipo wapi? School fees has to be paid somewhere. Okay. Round of final remarks. Let's talk about the issue too with the regional inequalities, Crispus, because Kenya is, is standing steadily when you talk about the regional stability and all that. Kenya stands so steadily in East Africa and Africa generally. And even if you go on the in the world platform, we are seen. So how do we make our faces known? What should the president do to make it even more brighter and more stable? In 2 minutes.
I think one of the issues I've always had a challenge with is the men and women that are put in our diplomatic offices across the region. Sometimes they don't fit the role that is required of them. Remember, our regional neighbors are our biggest trade partners: Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, DRC, and they are also the quickest opportunities for us we can be able to do business. If we are able to grow our industry here, the quickest place we can be able to find market is in this region. So therefore, the men and women who put in those offices there, in those regional offices, they are people who are able to build our business networks, be able to make sure our position as a country reflects well, our challenges here domestically are not perceived badly or the region, and also making sure that we are able to interact more in a better way with our regional players. Currently, our president is among the youngest in the region. And therefore, the Ugandan president, Kagame, some of the older peers that we have in the region, and therefore William Ruto appears to be the young one, together with the one of Ethiopia. But then they are the people with the biggest economies. They are young, yes, they should not be looked as young people, but they have the responsibility of steering the biggest economy, Ethiopia and Kenya. So therefore they need to be able to project that innovativeness in terms of how we steer the economy. The economies need to be different from others. In terms of what we position ourselves, it needs to look different. we need to stop relying with the traditional way of marketing Kenya, positioning Kenya in terms of the business proposition, in terms of diplomatic proposals. We need to look out different. And I think that is something I think Uhuru Kenyatta tried to do very well in terms of positioning the country in a very good position diplomatically. And with us now, because of the many mandamanos we've had, we have lost that position. So maybe you take advantage of the next 2 years to do that, bringing back the attractiveness Kenya has. And Kenya still has. If you go to West Africa, Southern Africa, they still respect Kenya as a stable country. So we haven't lost it. We have an opportunity to reorganize ourselves, but we can do more than we have done this.
We can do more.
Yeah.
We still have hope. And less about that, you can also talk about the issue with the value addition and market access, because that's what common manage would want to get. Whether subsistence or large-scale farming, production and all that, how we can access this market. Just teaching somebody else there on what we should do to make our bread basket even more full and bigger.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. I think in terms of value addition, this is the biggest missed target for this government. We started very well with those market value addition centers across the country. I remember Moses Kuria was moving around every county to set up those structures. I think that's the biggest lost space, because our agricultural sector, where we have the cash crops, where we have coffee, we have tea, we still export most of those products raw. We can do value addition here locally and then sell them out there as finished products. That would guarantee us between twice the current prices to even three times the current prices. Uganda's led the way. It's already processing its coffee and is deciding it leaves that country to your shelf, so that you don't go to Starbucks and you're getting coffee from Kenya but labeled another country. I think that is a space we need to occupy, and I think not just Kenya, African countries need to go that direction. What we can do is leverage on the structure the national government has. This was part of its manifesto. That will help us address the challenges in the agricultural sector. I did mention that all our cash crops have done very well in terms of volumes and in terms of payout to the farmers because of the reforms that are there. But not every part of Kenya has those cash crops. So we need to expand that support so that when you talk about the economy getting better, people cannot complain when the price of milk has gone up and the production of milk has gone up. Who is benefiting from this milk is a farmer. Can that return be tripled? Yes. If it's tea, the same. If it's coffee, if it's sugarcane, all that then gets to the common man who consumes the biggest chunk of our economy. Secondly, we cannot lie or run away from our public debt situation. And Kenyans need to be very patriotic. We are collecting about 15% of our GDP as taxes. And the reality is, so many of us don't pay taxes. There are a lot of informal businesses here. There are people who are driving big cars, don't pay taxes. The best thing for us to do, follow the South African model. There is a way you can still access personal data for people in a safe space without using it against them. Let us develop the right laws that allows KRA to do what is right. And we will collect an additional close to 3% of our GDP as taxes. We'll have addressed our public debt issue. That requires reforms in KRA and in revenue collection. Now, when it comes to expenditure, EGPay is important. If we have it, we'll probably also claw back on wastage in terms of what we spend in our country. Now, there's security, because a nation's security is key to its progress. We've tinted on the very, very dangerous borderlines. Kenyans need to know elections are there every 5 years. If you don't get it now, let's wait for 5 years. And if the government is bringing reforms that are not right, there are ways through which we can invalidate them, including through courts that are functional. Let's avoid this manner of denigrating and destroying our country in the names of this kind of process. And let's remember, I know we talked about those countries that are doing well, Singapore, China, but they have one common denominator. Those countries are not democratic. And I don't think it's the direction we want to go. We must remain democratic, abide by our 2010 constitution, which is probably the best in the world. And then finally, I would want to talk about the fight against graft. If you do not fight graft from a government perspective, we lose the populace who do otherwise have supported our good ideas. The government has very good ideas around SHA, very good ideas around affordable housing. But when they read about corruption cases that keep emerging from one area to the other, it dampens their spirit. Remember, we used to have kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. And Kenyans loved that phrase. And KRA would speak about it with a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
Today, even they feel fearful telling Kenyans kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea because along the way, some of these things are misconstrued.
Thank you.
And finally, as I conclude, let us also be patriotic in terms of what we convey out there. I know the issues around even the SHA that we talked about, the 104 billion. To the common man reading 104 billion SHA, they look at it as an entire scam.
Yeah.
This is money paid. The reality is somebody is investing in an infrastructure that you're not paying for. You'll be paying for it over a 10-year period. It may be expensive.
Yes.
It could have been done better, but let's have the right context around issues so that when we talk about this kind of environment, can you imagine 54 million Kenyans, or 24 million as it is now, being able to access services at level 2, 3, and 4, and even 5 and 6, and their digital data is constrained, is stored in some database that can be accessed from every part of the country. That is what this is all about. So it's also very big. We need to appreciate that.
And finally, because I want us to go to Kisumu and talk about, development and urbanization, we'll be talking to Abala Wanga, who is one of the big voices in Kisumu County. But Prof, in 1 minute, you've had a very busy time meeting delegation from Guangzhou, head of public service. How is Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology? You are a busy man.
No,
Final remarks.
Thank you very much, for raising that up. And I think that ties with the human capital development that we're looking at. The Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology is moving forward very fast. It's our newest university.
They're so busy.
We're actually expecting the president to come down there on the 29th to award the charter, and then we start working out there with our partners. We have all these people from China, from Korea, from Japan, from the US, from Europe, who are coming down there seeking for possibilities of collaboration, and this is part of our foreign diplomacy.
Yeah.
Just trying to ensure that we market Kenya as the destination of choice when it comes to human capital development, through tourism in that sector, and so on and so forth. And of course, this ties with the regional development that we've talked about. I think we are all alive to the fact that we need to stand firm as a country to ensure that we take our position regionally and also in the continent, given that regionally we're the largest economy, just ahead of Ethiopia, which is a massive country.
Yeah.
But importantly, as we build our value chains, as we develop them, and of course as we build, strengthen our manufacturing sector, it is important, of course, now to look into tariffs that we have across, neighbors, and to ensure that we also aligned with the Africa, continental free trade area, where now we need to unlock all the challenges that we have in there to ensure that our products find space in our neighboring countries, so that we take that leading role. But finally, it's important to look at at growing our economy to knowledge-based. And that is why in this area of digital development, all advanced economies that we see out there are all knowledge-based and innovation-led. And Kenya can play that important role in taking lead in the continent. And just like engineer said, we are an attraction across in the continent. If you go to Nigeria, they'll say that, we want to come to Kenya. If you go to South Africa, Kenya is the best country. Even when you see all these demos, whatever happens in Kenya cannot happen anywhere else. They are saying that, people can rise up against the government.
So Gen Zs will have
we will call that democracy. But in our case here, we call that our internal mechanisms of checking and putting checks and balances to the government, because we as Kenyans know exactly what we need from the government of Kenya.
That is a very powerful to state, one. That's a very powerful to finish that. So very soon we'll see KAIST up and running.
It's coming up. I'll be inviting you down there.
Oh, yes.
Just come see exactly what is happening.
All of us.
We start covering that. Become ambassadors. Because as I said, we are an engineering and we are the newest in town. It's a specialized university.
Great.
Just alongside now the National Defense and National specialized universities that we have in this country.
Okay.
Just to lead in that space and ensure that we grow Kenya to the next level.
We also need to go to Kisumu because we cannot grow. Thank you so much, gentlemen. FCPA Hesbon Omolo, Council Member, East Park, and of course Professor Mwele Mutisi, educationist, economist, and development expert. who is a governance expert. 3 wise men, they saw the star on a Monday morning. If you know what I'm talking about, they saw the star, the 3 wise men. Thank you so much for coming to the show. And you as a viewer, asante sana for watching. But then let's cross over to Kisumu.